She told me she needed space, that the corporate burnout was catching up to her, and the women's retreat in Sedona would be a reset. I did not question it. I paid for the flights myself. The brochure arrived 2 days after she vanished. A 3-day wellness weekend. She stayed 3 weeks. Last night, I opened a locked folder on our shared cloud drive. Inside were notarized documents I never signed, wire transfer receipts, and a silent video of her smiling as she walked through the gates of a house purchased in my aunt's name, the house I was supposed to inherit. She took everything. I said nothing. Not yet. We met the way people always assume these stories begin, through work, but not in the way you might think. She was an efficiency consultant for a failing division I was trying to rescue. I admired her mind before anything else. She noticed what others missed, dead weight disguised as loyalty, systems built on routine rather than purpose. She was precise, fast, and oddly still in the way she carried herself. We stayed late to compare notes. She admired my steadiness, I admired her ambition. We married 2 years later in a civil ceremony at a courthouse neither of us had time to decorate. There was no honeymoon, just a deadline and a merger. That suited us. We bought a modest 2-story home on a tree-lined street where the mailboxes were still wood and the neighbors trimmed hedges out of principle. Inside, everything was curated. Pale walls, steel fixtures, built-in shelving. The house felt more like a contract than a nest. Sparse, intentional, untouched by accident. I ignored the way she never truly settled in. She brought no childhood photos, left drawers empty, and kept her desk cleaner than mine. I told myself it was discipline. We did well professionally. I handled risk portfolios for private clients. She shifted into strategic recovery for distressed firms. When my aunt died, the will named me a sole inheritor of her estate, an unassuming property on the East Coast, paid for in full, maintained with obsessive care. She had no children of her own. "You were the only one who ever listened," she once told me when I visited her during a hurricane warning while everyone else texted apologies. I told my wife we would renovate it slowly, no rush, no debt, just something to build toward. She said that made sense. But over time, small things began to echo louder. She bought expensive travel bags for work trips and never checked luggage. She stopped asking how my day was and started telling me why hers was too complex to summarize. The bedroom dimmed, first emotionally, then physically. She said she was tired, often. I believed her, often. What I missed were the pauses before she answered questions. The way her phone was always face down, the name she stopped mentioning. Love, I have learned, does not leave all at once. It fades with the discipline of someone planning something else. The first thing I noticed was that the password to our joint investment account no longer worked. I thought little of it at first, platform updates, security resets, the usual friction of modern systems. I texted her for the login. She replied hours later with a clipped "I'll check later" in meetings. It stayed inaccessible for 3 days. Then came the trips. Consulting assignments, she said, were last minute, intense, and NDA bound. The destinations shifted from Chicago to Santa Fe to somewhere unnamed off-grid. And though she returned with receipts, they always looked curated. No wrinkles in the paper, no timestamps on the digital statements, no randomness in the photos she sent from hotel lobbies. She was colder, though not unkind. She still asked if I needed anything from the store, but no longer asked if I had slept well. Her affection became functional, like she was maintaining a performance she no longer rehearsed. Neighbors began to mention seeing her car parked blocks away, even when she said she was out of town. One even asked if we were renting a room. "Saw a woman coming out around 11 last Thursday, didn't look like a guest." I told them it must have been a mistake. I told myself that too. But small things unraveled with repetition. Account balances changed by a few hundred. Receipts for furniture I never saw. Muted phone calls she took from inside the car even when she was parked in our own driveway. Once, I asked what she had eaten that day. She paused too long, then said, "Salmon." We did not have salmon in the house. I began to write things down. Not because I believed she was lying, but because I wanted to believe she was not. The moment I remember most clearly came on a Sunday afternoon. I had made her tea.
She accepted it, sipped once, then placed a cup on the windowsill and stared out at nothing. I asked if everything was all right. She said yes, but she never turned around. That stillness, I realized later, was not reflection. It was calculation. She had already made decisions she had not yet executed. I began waking earlier, checking account logins before sunrise, taking screenshots, noting unfamiliar IP logins that she dismissed as VPN noise. She said the systems were overreacting. I started to doubt my reactions instead. And yet the doubt itself became the clearest proof. When someone you love begins to sound rehearsed, it is not the lies that break you. It is the silence that surrounds them. I did not confront her. I simply began to listen harder. It began with a quiet sync error on our shared cloud drive. A folder titled Retreat Logistics had duplicated itself on my desktop. A glitch, maybe, or a careless oversight. The original folder was empty. The duplicate was not. Inside were PDFs labeled as legal summaries, screenshots of bank interfaces I did not recognize, and a scanned lease agreement for a 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of the city, signed, notarized, and dated 3 months ago. The lessee, her. The emergency contact? Not me. I scrolled through old emails she had forwarded to herself from a dormant address I had long forgotten existed. Buried in threads were conversations with a realtor, a financial planner, and a friend I remembered from a wedding who had once told me, vaguely, that my wife had a gift for exits. She had opened 2 new accounts in her maiden name, re-registered her business as a sole proprietorship, and marked herself legally as single in 3 separate vendor applications. Every file was dated, time-stamped, deliberate. This had not happened in a moment of impulse. It had unfolded slowly, precisely, and with the calm of someone who assumed no one was looking. I looked. I clicked through each image, each document, not with rage, but with a silence so complete, it felt like oxygen had left the room. My heart did not race. It slowed. She thought I was not watching, I said aloud to no one. The monitor's glow cast long shadows across the floor. I did not call her. I did not ask questions. I copied the files to a secure drive and began backing up the folder under a neutral name. I did not confront. I documented. That became my rhythm. I found drafts of emails she had never sent, referencing next steps and once the wire clears. I found 2 versions of a resignation letter, hers, not mine. One polite, one strategic, both unsigned. She had written her exit before she had even told me she needed space. I closed the laptop and stood. The house felt different. I walked through each room deliberately, like I was preparing to testify about it. The bookshelf we installed together, none of the titles were hers. The guest room we said we would turn into an office still had its tags on the bedding. Even the refrigerator held more of my preferences than hers. She had curated presence, not permanence. The life we built was structured like a stage set, believable from a distance, but hollow behind the walls. I walked through the hallway we painted together that first autumn. The brush strokes were still uneven where I had left and said it was good enough. She had painted over them without telling me. That, I realize now, was the pattern. Not to erase, but to overwrite quietly. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom and understood that everything intimate had become inventory. This was not the scene of a betrayal, it was the blueprint of a strategy. I opened a locked cabinet and found nothing inside. That, more than anything else, confirmed what I needed to know. She had already emptied herself from this space, physically, financially, emotionally. I sat at the edge of the bed, not broken, not enraged, just clear. She had built her escape like an architect drafts a bridge, carefully, structurally, and without the need to look back. But bridges go 2 ways. I would follow her steps, not to stop her, but to close the route behind her, silently and completely. The first call I made was to the attorney who had helped me organize the estate after my aunt passed, an older man with quiet hands and a fondness for details. I asked to speak in person. He obliged without hesitation. In his conference room, I laid out my evidence, screenshots, email headers, lease agreements, and a complete index of every transfer I had tracked. He did not interrupt. He scanned silently, adjusting his glasses only once. When he finally spoke, his tone was precise. "That is attempted financial fraud." He turned the page toward me.
But the trust was built correctly. She cannot touch it. I had forgotten that years ago, at his insistence, we structured the inheritance as a separate entity, untouchable by marriage, protected from litigation, immune to quiet theft. "You are protected by structure," he said, almost as an affirmation. This was built to withstand pressure, even this kind. From there, everything moved quietly. He coordinated with a forensic accountant and a compliance officer from my firm. We initiated IP monitoring across access points linked to the trust accounts. Every login was logged, every unauthorized attempt recorded. I received quiet updates in a password-protected folder he called Observer. It was clinical, bloodless. I began forwarding what I had collected to him under subject lines like Sequence 1 and Lease Proof. He knew not to reply. I set up banking alerts keyed to her maiden name, flagged for real estate agents and wire transfer officers. I requested metadata analysis on the cloud files. Nothing dramatic, just methodical reinforcement. I did not ask for her to be punished. I asked only that she be seen by the systems she tried to work around. The law, unlike love, requires no emotion to respond. I changed nothing in our shared routines. I answered her calls when she made them, short and neutral. I told her the house was quiet, that I hoped the retreat was helping her reset. She thanked me for being understanding. I let her speak without interruption. She asked if I had thought more about selling the East Coast property, said it might be time to put that phase behind us. I said I would think about it. I did not mention that the deed was already frozen, flagged with a protective clause that required my notarized signature and video verification before any sale could proceed. Behind the scenes, my lawyer began preparing a private affidavit for financial misrepresentation and a notice of breach under fiduciary trust statutes. No letters were sent, no accusations made. We simply structured the evidence for weight, not noise. I backed up everything onto 2 identical hard drives, one stored with my attorney, the other kept in a safety deposit box she did not know existed. Every step she had taken had a corresponding ledger entry. What she thought was stealth, I documented. What she assumed would vanish, I archived. This was not revenge, it was resistance, clean, legal, and absolute. I adjusted nothing in our home. I moved no furniture, but I began collecting receipts, witness statements, digital breadcrumbs, quiet things, things that would not scream in a courtroom, but would whisper truth into every ledger she tried to erase. Power, I was learning, does not require noise. It requires proof and the patience to let it surface on its own terms. She returned on a Wednesday, unannounced but not unexpected. Her suitcase rolled lightly behind her, as though this were just another trip, another brief pause in an otherwise intact marriage. She kissed my cheek as she passed, too quickly, and commented on how clean the house felt. I watched her move through the kitchen with manufactured ease, as if presence alone could reset what had already calcified. She poured herself a glass of water, turned and said, "I've been thinking, we should simplify things. Sell the second house, maybe consolidate accounts. It's too much to manage." I looked at her, then at the glass in her hand. "It's already been simplified." She blinked. "What do you mean?" Her voice thinned just slightly at the edges. I did not elaborate. I sat at the dining table and motioned for her to join me. She hesitated, then did. She leaned forward, her posture casually assertive. "I've done a lot of reflecting, and I think we've both been drifting. That house, it's part of the past. We could use the equity to start fresh, somewhere smaller, more manageable." I nodded once. "You leased an apartment." She froze. What?" Her eyes searched mine, looking for weakness, confusion, anything she could still leverage. I gave her none. "Your friend in real estate forwarded the lease. You listed yourself as single." Her mouth opened, then closed. She reached for control. "It's not what it looks like. I was keeping options open. We were in a fragile place. I didn't want to scare you." I tilted my head slightly. "You moved half the trust into a holding account under a new name. You transferred titles you did not own. You submitted my signature digitally without consent." The silence after that was a long hallway. She laughed once, forced. "You're overreacting. It was temporary. I was going to fix it." I stood slowly, not to intimidate her, but to make the weight of the moment impossible to confuse.
You were not supposed to be watched.
That was your mistake. Her expression changed, not entirely into panic, but into something approaching it. Her lips parted to object, but no sound followed. I watched her realize that every step had been seen, catalogued, time-stamped. She reached again, softer now. I didn't take anything that mattered. Not really. I looked past her, at the glass of water she had left untouched. Then you will not mind what comes next. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse. I simply walked past her to the front room and opened the file box I had placed by the door hours earlier. It contained copies. Nothing more. I did not hand it to her. I left it on the table. She stared at it like it was alive. "What is that?" she asked. "Everything," I said. "Everything you left behind." Then I walked upstairs, closed the door, and let her sit with the silence she had created. Her attorney contacted mine with a tone that could only be described as prematurely confident. A carefully worded letter arrived 2 days later claiming financial misunderstanding, marital ambiguity, and shared access rights. My attorney responded with a 47-page packet, cleanly indexed, evidencing every transfer, forged authorization, and attempt at digital obfuscation. IP logs from her supposed retreat matched the exact timestamps of unauthorized access to the trust interface, confirmed by location data on her own devices, screenshots she had not thought to scrub, and even metadata embedded in PDF edits. Within hours, her tone shifted. Her attorney, realizing the weight of what had been sent, asked for a private mediation. We declined. A forensic accountant traced a pattern of systematic depletion from our joint accounts, all routed through temporary financial shells she had opened under false names and dissolved before her return. The accounts had been drained not impulsively, but surgically, as if she believed she was ahead of any detection system that could catch her. But the systems were already watching, because I had put them in place. A neighbor, the same one who had once asked if we were renting a room, gave a written statement confirming multiple sightings of her car during weeks she claimed to be out of state, and even recalled a delivery driver dropping furniture she said was for a new client. She never mentioned a client. She changed legal counsel within the week. The new attorney's first request was to pause communications while the client reevaluates her position. We sent them the updated logs, along with video footage of her removing documents from my filing cabinet in the middle of the night, footage pulled from a motion-triggered security camera I had installed months earlier. Her response came not in words, but in the sudden deletion of several of her business accounts and the closing of the email she had used to orchestrate her escape. The court hearing was scheduled, though it no longer served its original purpose. By the time we reached the preliminary session, everything had already been proven. Her counsel entered without her, requested to speak off the record, and submitted an informal proposal for settlement. We had not asked for money. We had asked only for recognition. The judge reviewed the documentation and asked a single question. "Do you contest these records?" Her lawyer answered, after a pause, "We do not." She sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, hands folded, eyes lowered, dressed as if to appear smaller than the woman who had once spoken so precisely about starting fresh. I passed her without slowing, without a word. Her web had not collapsed. It had been dissected, piece by piece, until the illusion of control she built around it simply evaporated. There was nothing left for her to deny. Every lie had a timestamp. Every theft had a signature. And now, in the language of the system she had tried to outmaneuver, she no longer existed as a threat. Just a file. Just a record. Just a closed case. Under the quiet watch of an overcast sky, we met one final time in the austere back room of a law office that had become our battleground and our confessional. The settlement was meticulously fair yet uncompromising, a return of a portion of misappropriated funds, a sealed non-disclosure agreement signed by both parties, and the finality of legal language that bound our past to a contract of closure. I looked at her, at the woman who had meticulously unspooled our shared life, and saw no vengeance in my eyes, only an unwavering calm that spoke of inner reclamation. She, with her shoulders drawn and her gaze lowered, accepted the documents with a trembling hand that betrayed the facade she had once so carefully maintained.
I whispered, almost as though speaking to the ghost of what we once were. It was never about the money. In that moment, my tone was not accusatory, nor was it triumphant. It was simply the honest distillation of years lived under shared ambitions now irrevocably altered by betrayal. The legal restitution ensured that part of what she had taken would be returned, but there were no grand declarations of punishment, only the measured reallocation of what rightfully belonged to me. In the stillness of that encounter, neither of us furthered the narrative of conquest or ruin. Instead, I reminded her softly, almost imperceptibly, "What you tried to take was never yours," a statement that resonated far deeper than any courtroom order or fiscal ledger could articulate. As she nodded, the weight of the unsaid, the bitterness, the regret, the lost potential, hung in the charged silence between us. I saw in her eyes for a fleeting moment a realization, a break in the carefully wrought mask of superiority, revealing instead the vulnerability of a woman who had overreached. I left the room with neither satisfaction nor sorrow, knowing that the true victory lay in having reclaimed the narrative of my own destiny, in having transmuted betrayal into a foundation for rebuilding rather than destroying. The settlement was strict, fair, and final, an act of moral restitution that kept my conscience clear and my future unburdened by the shadow of her deceit. In that parting glance, as she retreated into a future defined by silence and accountability, I walked away whole, unchained by the past, steadfast in the belief that integrity, however quietly claimed, always trumped the hollow weight of stolen legacies. The household within 3 weeks. I left the key in a plain envelope on the kitchen counter, beneath the windowsill where her untouched glass of water had once sat. I did not return for a final tour. There was nothing sentimental left in the walls, only the memory of a life curated for appearance, stripped now of its illusion. The proceeds went directly into a foundation established in my aunt's name, designed to fund scholarships for first-generation students pursuing architecture, a field she had once dreamed of, but could never afford. I attached no biography to the donation, no press release, no commemorative plaque. It was enough to build something from the ashes without explaining the fire. I spent that winter quietly, keeping no calendar. I traveled east to visit the old property one last time, now secured, legally untouchable. I did not enter. I stood by the gate and left a letter tucked beneath a loose stone in the foundation. Nothing dramatic, just a few lines of gratitude addressed to the woman who had raised me to see value in what others overlook. The river behind the house had risen slightly from rain. I watched it move without urgency, carrying away the last of the leaves that had clung too long to the shore. In the months that followed, I returned to smaller rituals, morning walks, clean ledgers, dinners with a friend who never asked for details and never offered pity. In one of those dinners, over simple food and long pauses, I found the shape of something steady again. Not love, not yet, but the quiet possibility of trust unspoken. I learned to build without consultation, to plan without permission. The silence that once felt like absence had become space. I do not miss her. I miss the version of myself that once believed her. But even that, in time, has become something I no longer grieve. I still build. I just build alone now. And this time, it will last.